Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. It's not uncommon for folks to make New Year's resolutions about personal finance and need a little something other than tax day to get back on track once spring hits. As it happens, April is Financial Literacy Month, so producer Maya Norfleet sat down to talk about our personal relationship with money with Paris Woods, college access professional and author of the book The Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom. Here's Maya.
So we talk about books a lot on this show. And I'm one of those readers that judges books by their cover. And the title and illustration definitely grabbed my attention. The book is titled The Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom, Build Wealth, Retire Early, and Live the Life of Your Dreams. And there's an illustration of a Black woman with dollar signs in her eyes.
Come on.
So clearly, the audience for this book are Black women. In your opinion, what about Black women's experiences with money seems to be so common that compelled you to write this book?
So first of all, I am a Black woman, and I had to reflect on my own experiences growing up surrounded by phenomenal women who were talented, who were smart, who had so much to offer the world, and who unfortunately did not have access to the financial means to fully reach their potential. And the first woman that comes to mind for me when I think of that type of woman is my mother. She was a single mother. She ended up raising 6 kids, including my sister and 4 little cousins, on a secretary's salary. She was an ordained minister, and she had gone to college and dropped out, but she still had all of her psychology books in the house. And so I got to witness the genius of my mother. I got to see her studying to prepare her sermons. I got to see her action in the world, mentoring other young mothers, mentoring folks through the church as a pastor, finding educational opportunities for my sister and for our family, which is a feat all into its own if you don't have money growing up, especially in a city like St. Louis, where your zip code can really determine the opportunities you have access to. So it took a lot of superhuman effort for her to find good schools for us to attend. So all of those things were true, and yet she really struggled financially, and our family experienced poverty growing up. We moved around a lot. I saw my mom in tears, making lists of bills, trying to figure out how to make ends meet. We spent time, living in our car, living in family members' basements, living in housing projects. Like all of those things were part of my experience as a result of the concept of money. So when I thought about the potential of Black women, I considered people like my mother and their experiences. And then I thought about my peers, my colleagues, right? So I am the dream of my family. Yeah. I talk about being the hope and the dream of our ancestors. I did get an education and did sort of escape poverty and walk into the middle class, into the upper middle class. And so I have, a lot of colleagues who are in a similar boat, well-educated Black women who command a lot of financial resources. And the gap that I saw was around our discussions. So I had begun learning about the concept of financial freedom and financial independence, and reading books and listening to podcasts and going to conferences. And so much of that discussion was led by white males. And I did not see a lot of Black women in those conversations. And when I brought up the concept to my friends, right, to people who actually had the financial resources to do something really exciting, to create real freedom for themselves and their families and their communities, the concept was a foreign one. And so I really wanted to bridge that gap and not only show folks like my mother who had the power and ability, but not the tools and resources to access finances, how to do that, but also for women who then have access have access to finances, how to turn that money into freedom. So I wanted to make that possible and to bring a Black female voice into this conversation.
And we're going to talk about freedom a whole lot in our conversation. So money is one of the few things that actually ties everybody together. And knowing that your desired audience for this book is specifically Black women, can readers that aren't Black women gain anything from your book?
I get so many messages from folks saying, can boys read the book? I'm not a Black woman. I'm not a Black person. Can I read the book? What's true about the book is that I offer sound financial advice and authentic stories. A lot of it is my own story growing up and a lot of the mistakes that I made personally on my own journey of figuring out how to manage money well. All of those things are universal. And there is almost a love letter that I'm writing to fellow Black women to say, I see you, this is possible for you, and I want you to know that you can have the freedom that you dream of, that our ancestors dreamed of for us. It's totally possible today.
And speaking of that journey, when I was reading your book, I was like, I'm getting almost like a workbook. And then I'm also learning so much about Paris. It's like almost like a biography next to like a textbook almost. What do you hope the reader gets from that juxtaposition of learning about you and your personal journey and then that very sound advice? What do you hope, like, as another reader picks it up, what do you want them to get from that juxtaposition?
Thank you. I'm so glad that was your experience.
Yeah.
I don't speak just to speak. I don't write just to write. I really wanted folks to be empowered to take action. So when I thought about how to set the book up to make it actionable, I wanted folks to be able to relate and sort of have these mindset shifts about what's possible, which comes through the stories of other people. Someone you can relate to who's been where you've been starts to help you believe that more is possible, that different is possible, and that you can do it too. But I didn't want to stop there. So once you believe you can do something different, I wanted you to have the step-by-step guidance in order to take action. And the thing I'm most proud of, the thing I most love when people message me on social media is to say, you know, I finally did open that account. I finally did take the next step because it was suddenly much more clear than it had ever been before. So the book, you know, is designed not to be your typical personal finance book. I think there are so many good resources. So much has been written about this. I've read a lot of those books, but there seemed to be a gap between knowledge and execution, and that is the gap that I wanted to fill.
Tell me more about that gap of knowledge versus execution.
It's one thing to know what to do, and it's another thing to feel confident that you can actually take the next step. A lot of folks, I think the investing chapter is one where I spent a lot of time, a lot of edits. I had a lot of folks read it and say it and to give me feedback on how clear it was and whether or not they then felt empowered to take the next step. And the feedback that I got, you know, I had readers reading the book who were educated, who had 401ks, who sort of were aware of what they should be doing, but had never taken the next step because it all felt so confusing. And I think there's a myth that personal finance needs to be complicated, that you need, you know, a PhD in finance in order to navigate this world. And I think that myth, you know, it serves the folks who then make money off of your inability to execute. And I take issue with folks being disempowered, especially around something as personal as money. Like you're trading hours of your life every single day. The most valuable resource you have, right, is your time. We're trading that valuable resource for money, and we should be empowered to make the choices about what we do with our money, and we shouldn't feel as if we have to turn those choices over to someone else. So I wanted folks to walk away and say, with this valuable resource, I know exactly what I want to do. I have the tools to set goals for myself and then the tools to take action on those goals. And there's a whole community of people who are just as empowered, and that community should include Black women.
So on the first page of the part 1 of your book, you have a quote from Audre Lorde, and it's a very simple one-liner that smacked me upside the head. And it reads, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." And this quote is actually a title of one of her essays in her 1984 book titled Sister Outsider. And Audre Lorde, constantly wrote about her experience as a Black queer woman and how she combated society's view of her and its reactions to just her existing. But in your book, it leads to a chapter about credit. Share with me how credit serves as one of those so-called tools, and which house or houses are you attempting to dismantle with this book?
Yes, so I too love that Audre Lorde quote. I think the first time I heard it, I was smacked.
Like, oh my God.
As well. And it has really stuck with me as a reminder to think differently and to start to become aware of either systems or beliefs or tools, things that exist that keep us stuck where we are, that it's worth looking at again and seeing if there is an alternative, a pivot, a third way, another way to approach it so that we can experience freedom. That's how I hold that quote in my own life, and I was happy to offer it to readers at the beginning of a journey that we were going to go on, talking about the role that debt plays in our life and some mental shifts we could make that would enable us to experience financial freedom on the other side of debt. And the reason why this showed up for me as a system, sort of a belief that unconsciously keeps us bound, is because I was very much raised to view debt as a point of pride, right? So when I bought my very first car, financed it, my family was proud of me for being able to get a car loan without a cosigner, right? And so growing up in a family where even being able to access lending was limited, like traditional lending was limited. I was raised to believe that debt was good. Having a high credit score was the greatest thing you could aspire to, and that being able to get into debt was actually a normal thing, right? It's normal to have credit card debt. It's normal to have a car loan. It's normal to be in debt. And it took a big mental shift for me to consider that there might be a life outside of being indebted. And when I really started to internalize what that meant, my undergraduate degree is in African American Studies. And so grateful I got to spend 4 years really digging into my own history and digging into the sociology of racism and the ways in which racism has perpetuated throughout our society, even through to today. One of the examples that really stuck with me was sharecropping. And, following slavery, many of our ancestors were offered the opportunity, right, to continue to work those same farms.
And that's so-called opportunity.
Right? That's a quotation.
Air quotes around opportunity.
The quote opportunity to continue to work the land. And those former owners tipped the scales and made folks borrow a lot up front. They controlled the cost of the goods. And really at the end of the day, those sharecroppers were indebted. And they never really owned their labor. They never really owned their goods. And it was just another way to keep those people bound. It was another form of slavery. And when I thought about the role that debt played in my life, played in my family's life, and plays in so many of our lives, it felt very similar. There's so much that folks wish they could do, but debt is what's keeping us from doing those things. Right. And we hear this narrative a lot when we talk about student loans. A lot of folks are saying, I wish I could buy a house. I wish I could start a family if it weren't for these loans. Yeah. And that's often so true for many of us. And so I had to think about this combination of folks being proud of being able to get into debt, this sort of normalizing of debt, juxtaposed with the reality that debt is really the ball and chain, right, that keeps us from achieving the level of freedom that we really want to have. It's a huge mental shift, right? It is the house that keeps us bound. And when I think about the Audre Lorde quote, because she says the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Debt has become a tool. It's become a tool to keep us bound to jobs we don't like. It's become a tool to keep us bound to a life that is beneath our calling, beneath what is really possible for us. And we have the power, first, to change our minds about the role that debt's going to play, So that's what the first thing I'm up to in that part of the book is, let me change your mind about the role that debt's going to play, and then let me give you some tools to come out of that.
We'll have more of their conversation after a quick break. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio. Welcome back. Let's return to producer Maya Norfleet's conversation about our relationship with money and debt. Here's Maya again.
Now, another reference that I really enjoyed in your book is the title of Chapter 4, Get Out, which is, of course, a nod to Jordan Peele's horror film from 2017. And in this chapter, you talk about getting out of the sunken place, which if you haven't seen Get Out, you really need to go see it. But the sunken place, it looks like, just like to me, it looks like a pit of despair. And the main character is falling, but falling slowly. And there's just nothing to grab a hold to. And you, Paris, you compared this scene to being in debt. And debt comes in many forms. Like you said, student loan debt, which everyone is talking about now in regards to forgiveness. And there's also, of course, credit card debt, car loan debt. So I want you to paint the picture for me of what about the sunken place from that film reminds you of that specifically.
When I thought of the sunken place, I thought of losing control of the ability to make choices in your own life. Some external force is controlling you, and they're also benefiting. And in the movie, we have Black men, right?
Yeah.
Who their hosts are benefiting from their physicality, their labor, their ability. And isn't that so true?
Yeah.
Of the way that marginalized communities are often used in society. When I think of Black women, I think about undervalued labor. Black women have been part of the workforce for a very long time,
right.
Even longer than many of our counterparts. And so much of what's been accomplished in the country, even, down to the civil rights movement, to many of the sort of pillars of our society, there was a Black woman, a woman of color, behind the scenes doing the labor.
Yeah.
Right? So we have folks benefiting from our labor, and there's sort of a normalizing of that, right? And so one of my favorite quotes when folks love to ask me about budgeting, love to ask me about the tools, and I have to pause and remind us that we can't budget our way out of poverty, right? It's not about the tools. Like at some point we have to step back and say, I actually need to earn more and deserve to earn what I am worth. And I want Black women to know that your labor is valued, your intellectual labor is valuable.
Yeah.
And we've got to start to command what we are worth. What I trade my time for, I have to pause and actually ask myself, is it worth it? Is this job worth it? Is this opportunity worth it? Is this volunteer request worth it? And to make sure that we are benefiting from our labor and from our time. And the case that I make, and the reason why I want Black women specifically to start to value our time, is what's possible on the other side of us being paid fairly, and on the other side of us actually having control over our labor and our time. We birth society, right? We are the mothers, we are the teachers.
The caregivers.
And yes. So when we as a community become free, I think we save the world. Like we are the ones we've been waiting for. And I want this community in particular to have those tools. I think it benefits us all.
A big thing that I picked up even in reading your book is how comfortable it felt. Like this is our first time meeting, my first time hearing your voice in person. And I already felt so comfortable because of just the way that you talk about not even just like debt, credit, but just money in general. Even though we all experience money in some way, either having it or not having it, or trying to earn it or losing it. Everybody deals with money at some point, but we don't talk about it with one another.
Yes. It's like that taboo that holds us back.
Do you consider that another tool as far as like oppression or like progressing or getting to freedom? Is that the fear of talking about money?
Absolutely. And where does that even come from?
Who taught us that? Who taught us that we shouldn't talk about this?
Yeah. It's like we attach so much value to money and value to what we earn, and we're afraid of people judging us. And I'm not saying that's an unfounded fear, right? Like the average person on the street, you probably don't want to sit down and open up your checkbook and talk about what's in there. But I do think it benefits us as women to find a community that we feel comfortable, whether it's your best friend, whether it's your mother. We should have access to a community of women who are comfortable having these types of real conversations.
So getting out of debt is hard, but it's possible. Saving money is hard, but it is possible. And toward the end of your book, you start talking about dreams and retiring early. And as much as I love the thought of that, I don't see that happening for me personally. And it kind of scares me. You get into how it's possible in your book, obviously, but I need a little bit more convincing, Paris. How can people, specifically Black women, make that dream come true?
I was raised, to believe that faith is the evidence of the thing we can't see, right? It's the proof when you don't have any. And that's what it took. And, to your comment about, well, I just don't believe it. I haven't seen it to be true. I don't have the evidence. Sometimes all we have is faith, right? And I think that's probably why faith and spirituality and church has played such a role in our community, because for a long time, that's all we had, to believe better was possible, even though I don't see the pathway. I don't see any reason to believe that could be possible. I'm going to believe anyway.
Yeah.
That's how it started for me. And that's what I invite people to do. Like, let's suspend reality for a moment. And I want you to really challenge yourself to name what is the deepest desire of your heart. Like, what is the thing that you really want in your life? Even if you don't know how to make it true, name that thing. Like, let's not start with reality. Let's start with the dream and the vision. I have found that naming that thing all of a sudden creates space for the how. It creates at least an opportunity to figure out what the first step might be. Now, in the book, I am holding a dream for people around financial freedom. And I define this as having complete control over your time and your labor, like, period. I call it early retirement. And, because that's the FIRE movement, that's the language that we're using. Financial independence, retire early.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that is retiring from doing anything you don't want to do, like having complete control over your labor. I think this is what our ancestors would have dreamed for us as Black women. I want you to work because you want to, and work not because you need that next paycheck. And there are some actual steps you can take to start to make that a reality. You don't have to be a millionaire for that to be true, right? So once we start with the vision, start with the destination in mind, I'm going to give you some steps you can start to take to start to build momentum. And then I hope that readers will be open to whatever comes as what that very next step might be, whatever opportunity falls out of the sky, right? We can't predict what exciting thing might lay around the corner, just beyond the horizon. It's the way I say it to myself. I don't know what's just beyond the horizon, but I'm going to keep taking the next step so I can see. So that's my invitation. And I think freedom is possible. I really do.
Because of your background in college access, and for so long, many different cultures, many different ethnic backgrounds, all the different communities saw higher education as a tool to get out of poverty. But now we are seeing so many people, like we talked about earlier, that ball and chain of I can't own my own home or own land. I can't afford to start a family because of these loans. And then there's also this notion that I don't like to hear, but people say it a lot, is that college isn't for everyone. And I don't necessarily like how that feels or how that sounds. But at the same time, I wouldn't wish this student loan debt on my worst enemy. So how do you balance that, both in, in your role in college access and also in your interest and your book about personal finance? How do you balance those two ideas of financial freedom, but getting rid of that ball and chain of student loans, or all the different debt, but student loans included?
I do believe that college is for all. Like, folks should not be excluded from the opportunity to pursue higher education if that is what they want. Mm-hmm. And I think that college is and should be an informed choice that young people get to make. Mm-hmm. So often we tell folks, just go to college, and as long as you have that degree, the future will be rosy, and that is an incomplete picture. And young people need to be informed, have the opportunity, first of all, to explore and get exposed to different sorts of career opportunities. So I think that would be the first piece, to know that there actually are multiple pathways to good jobs that pay well, that have strong upward trajectories within them for advancement. Many of those pathways involve a college degree, but there are many that don't, right? So making an informed choice about whether or not I'm going to go to college. Mm-hmm. The second piece is, if you want to go to college, which I love college, I love school.
This
was
went to
my
a
path,
whole lot of school.
So I'm not going to lie, right? I can't sit up here and say I don't believe in college when I got all these degrees. So,
yeah.
I love college. And I want folks to realize that you are the consumer and the college is the business, right? You're the customer. They need to present a value proposition to you. Like, what am I getting in exchange for this degree? What am I getting in exchange for my money? And even if you're getting a scholarship, somebody's money is being paid.
Right.
What am I receiving in exchange for this? In the book, I offer multiple pathways for getting that money, right? I didn't pay for college. I don't think anyone should go into debt for college. And so I offer a very comprehensive guide on how to make that true. Mm-hmm. And then, on the other side of that, I think there's also a hidden curriculum about how we translate education into career opportunities. And I know a lot of young people, and this was true for me as well, who go to college and learn the academic piece, but actually don't learn how to create a resume in college, how to find a good job. And that first job out of college is so important because it sets you up for the rest of your career trajectory. Yeah. So I think that's the missing piece. College is not the destination. It is a step on the journey, and we got to keep on educating ourselves and taking the steps in order to get a good job on the other side of it.
This episode was produced, recorded, and edited by Maya Norfleet.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
St. Louis on the Air proudly supports local artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.